As we first examine Thomas Wilbur Beauchart's Toilet of Venus, we see a woman so captivated with her own reflection that she contorts her neck so as to glance into the mirror held by the angel behind her. This woman, so drawn to her own reflection, is in fact Venus, the goddess of pleasure, love, fertility, and beauty. Now, though we can immediately distinguish the painting's Baroque characteristics, it can be debated as to whether Beauchart's rendition of the Toilet of Venus is traditional to the era. That is to say, does the painting even truly depict Venus? As we look at other portrayals of the goddess during the Baroque, we can see that Beauchart's painting deviates in some ways from his contemporaries. This Baroque era, however, was not warmly embraced by the Western art world, as the intensely theatrical and dramatic works stunned those who had been previous advocates of the traditional Renaissance. The name Baroque, which was originally given as an insult, marked a period in Europe of heightened tensions following the Catholic Counter-Reformation. This rendering of Venus, done by Beauchart, is an example of how painting had transformed following this religious upheaval. This depiction of Venus is brimming with Baroque characteristics, as even with a first glance we can see the strong diagonal that dominates the space. This diagonal is evident because Beauchart uses the relationship of light and dark to draw the viewer's eyes from the luminous white flesh of the baby in the bottom right corner up to the alluring and darkened mirror that Venus is so taken with. This is an example of how artists of the Baroque had a deeper desire to express the drama of their subjects through drastic shadows and intense highlights. When these dynamic works were placed alongside the traditional Renaissance paintings that had come before, it was evident that these Baroque painters no longer wished to paint light, one-tone scenes. The Birth of Venus by Sandro Botticelli, which is yet another painting of the female deity, is one of the essential Renaissance works that use such light pastel tones. Botticelli's work, in which the nude Venus emerges from the sea foam, is an intimate illustration that is one of the world's most celebrated paintings. However, even though this scene depicts the wind god behind Venus, blowing her to shore, it appears as if all four figures stand alongside each other. Even the maiden who rushes on shore to cover the beauty appears as though she is next to Venus, who still remains in the water. This technique was not to be a common practice of the Baroque, as the concentration was placed immensely on depth and foreshortening. This was done because these Baroque artists wished for scenes that tempted viewers and gave them a sense of reality in the space. As such, deep, rich backgrounds were used in contrast of bright, highlighted foregrounds to portray a sense of depth in these intricate studies. As shown in the Toilet of Venus, the background is dim and therefore places focus on the theatrical glance of Venus and the children in the foreground. In Botticelli's work, however, Venus stands relaxed and alone in the contrapposto pose, causing light and dark to play no part in how distinguishable she is among the other figures. Like many Renaissance painters, Botticelli chooses to deliberately separate his figures, so as to place emphasis on their individuality. However, as shown in the Toilet of Venus, overlapping in the Baroque was a basic characteristic of almost all works, as the babies placed on Venus shadow part of her body. It is as if Beauchart does not wish for us to miss a second of the action, painting the scene almost as if it were shot from a camera. The dynamic quality of the piece creates a sense of commotion and reality, as the figures appear as though they could move freely throughout the space. This painting almost begs for the viewer to interact and participate within the scene, as if they were watching it unfold right before their eyes. This also begs for the viewer to inquire about the individuals, as if they are now more attainable and real because of their relaxed quality. Because of this, we can begin to wonder about the actual individuals featured in the Toilet of Venus, such as we asked earlier, is this even truly Venus?
When viewed in comparison to other works of the Toilet of Venus made within the same era, it is easy to detect similarities between Beauchart's depiction of Venus and those of his contemporaries. If you look at Diego Velázquez's Venus at her mirror, we see a similar image of a woman reflecting on her own beauty, with the mirror being held up by Cupid. Here, she is fully nude and reclining on a sofa with her back towards us, as if being so immersed in her own beauty, she is conscious of nothing else around her. In Francois Boucher's Toilet of Venus, painted a little bit later in 1751, Venus is again fully nude and surrounded by Cupids. In this depiction, there is no mirror for her to reflect upon, but rather is surrounded by lavish items, such as pearls, with the cupids playing with her hair. She is touching her hair lightly, as if reveling in her own body, while holding onto a dove, a symbol of Venus. In Titian's Venus with a Mirror, she is partially clothed with a fur cloak that hugs around her bottom, but it is clearly falling off of her body, leaving her upper half completely nude. In closely observing Boucher, Velázquez, and Titian's works in comparison with Bouchard's, there are various discrepancies. Bouchard's Venus is completely clothed, with heavy drapery that veils nothing pertaining to her body underneath. Its texture is emphasized in the painterly way Boucher lays oil on canvas. This causes concern because Venus has always been depicted in the nude, whether fully or partially, unlike in this work here where the heavy garments shadow her physique. The mirror that is being held up by Cupid is very important when trying to break down this image. With doubts already in place regarding who this woman may be, it is important to note that mirrors are often associated with the virtue of prudence. Prudence is a female allegorical figure that is the personification of foresight, usually depicted with a mirror in her hands to represent wisdom, insight, and knowledge. The woman in this image, however, does not quite align with prudence completely, due to the roses found in the foreground and in the children's crown of flowers. Along with all the cupids, they are all major attributes to Venus. If you take a look closely behind the woman, there is a small child holding a dolphin that is pouring water into a large fountain. This figure is particularly intriguing because it's evidently placed to give a hint towards the subject matter, as dolphins are attributes of Venus. Yet it is painted hidden in the background to such an extent that one may wonder if it is even symbolic of Venus or if it's just a figure placed to fill space. Take note of the small children in the foreground and how they are wingless. How can this be Venus when she is surrounded by babies rather than winged cupids? This may be evidence of the woman being another allegorical figure, Charity. Charity is usually depicted surrounded by 3 or 4 babies, with one baby suckling at her breast. She is also sometimes depicted picturing with torches or candles, representing the love of God being a source of light. In Anthony van Dyck's Charity, the woman has the same expression and motion of looking upward as in Bouchard's Toilet of Venus. However, there are problems with this figure being Charity due to a fact mentioned earlier regarding her clothes and how incredibly bulky they are. They give no head to her figure, whereas the allegory of Charity is almost always shown in a light billowy garment where the nipple is clearly visible. It is extremely difficult to completely identify this figure in one way because there are numerous attributes that can lead not only to Venus but to prudence and charity as well. What makes this painting so enticing is its classic Baroque style combined with its mystifying subject matter. The fact that this one female figure can be so many different allegories is incredibly intriguing, and the Binghamton Art Museum is lucky to have such a diverse work of art.